Hook 'em. Talking Texas football with all of you for the next 60 here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you stopping by. If you're watching on the main channel, please head on over to the Texas channel. We will drop the link in the chat. We want to build up the Texas audience, and so you can have a community over there on Texas football all the time, 24/7, 365 all the time. We appreciate all the other fan bases joining in, but you take a back seat to Texas in this hour. So we want Texas fans here first and foremost. But again, all college football fans are welcome. Matthew Miller's here, of course, breaking down the horns. Matthew, what's going on tonight?
Nothing much, but I think Texas always takes a front seat to every college football fan base. No, I'm kidding, but maybe I'm not. You'll have to see. But yeah, please subscribe. It helps out. We're here every Monday after every game as well. So check out the Texas channel.
That's the deal. Every Monday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central, 6 o'clock where it counts right there in Austin, and talking Texas. And I've got a few things to throw at Matthew. We'll start with the news of the week, which starts with the cornerback coming in from San Jose State and Javion Cole. What's the scouting report on Mr. Cole?
Yeah, so he was a 3-star portal transfer, number 1 in the portal currently out of the cornerbacks, even over like a 5-star Cormani McClain. Pro Football Focus had a passer rating of 40.8 when thrown his way. He had 3 interceptions and 10 pass breakups, which were both top 6 in the country last year. So he's definitely a ball hawk type cornerback. I think he plays the ball better than anyone Texas has on their roster currently. I guess you can include him now. So I think he's the best at playing the ball out of all the cornerbacks. I will say he's a little bit undersized. He's 5'10", he's 175. In a PK system, he usually likes the big, long, lengthy corners like Malik Muhammad, who's 6'1". But overall, I think he's a good player. I think he's a slight upgrade over Terrence Brooks, even though I do think Terrence Brooks probably has more upside. I think Javion Cole's a nice player who, if he just plays to his ability, will be the starting cornerback on the opposite side of Malik Muhammad. I think you'll have Gavin Holmes, just like last year, come in, take him out at some point for 10 to 20% of the snaps, but you're going to see him mostly on the field. And then maybe Kobe Black competes for that second starting cornerback, really highly rated coming out of high school. Some sites had him as a low 5-star, most had him as a high 4-star. I think this cornerback position group got a little bit better with this addition. And again, Pro Football Focus had him as a top 20 cornerback overall. So he's definitely a draftable player as well. So slight upgrade here over Terrence Brooks. I think Texas did okay in the portal. I think they could have done a little bit better, but overall it isn't a bad addition, Mark.
All right. So if we look at passing attacks against San Jose State last year, no, this is not breaking down specifically, of course, who he faced as a receiver, quarterback combination, or in any way looking at his side of the field. But just in general, USC obviously could fling it as well as anyone with Caleb Williams at quarterback. Again, we'd have to dive into the deep numbers there. Oregon State the next week with San Jose State's a non-conference opponent, really good football team, but not much of a passing attack. Although with DJ Uiagalelei, they threw it more effectively and more often than they had before that. And then they went deep into their Mountain West Conference schedule, aside from a date at Toledo against the Rockets, really good MAC team that won the conference last year or made it to the conference championship game. And then in the bowl game, they took on Grayson McCall and Coastal Carolina. And they fared pretty well in these games after the first 2 outings against USC, giving up 56 and Oregon State 42. And we see his stat line for the season with 38 tackles. And as you mentioned, 3 picks. And if you look at the game log, anything jumps out here. Let's see. He had his picks against New Mexico, Utah State, and Hawaii. Yeah, 3 games in a row. There it is, right in the middle of the season. And passes defense, 10 on the season, 3 against Toledo in particular. So Pro Football Focus obviously puts more of a spotlight on it in regards to grinding down the performance. And you said that wasn't a 40% completion percentage. That was a 40 quarterback rating?
Yeah, 40.8 passer rating when thrown against. So, I mean, and just the tape shows you, to me, he plays the ball very well. He's definitely one of those guys where I think he's more of a boom or bust guy. When he's there, he's going to come down with it. And I think if with the right coaching, he can be the best or second best cornerback on this team. Like I said, I think it's a slight upgrade over Terrence Brooks. It's not Takario Davis. Takario Davis takes this secondary to, in my opinion, to another level. But I think this is a solid addition and solid starting addition. And like I said, Texas and Steve Sarkisian is going to play the best player. So it's either going to be him, Gavin Holmes, or if Kobe Black really shines out, he's got the pedigree. His brother was a very good cornerback with Oklahoma State. He could also play there too. And don't forget, Jahdae Barron actually was getting reps at that field cornerback position. He was the nickel cornerback last year, one of the best nickelbacks in the country. He was getting reps over there, so he could play there too. So I think overall, this is a very diverse secondary group. We'll see what they do.
Okay, that's the hit on the week, the miss on the week with Dom Williams, the defensive tackle. Much, I don't want to say needed, but it would have been a great addition as an all Big 12 performer, first team last year for TCU, and goes to Oklahoma. So Texas is going to see him at least once a year.
Yeah. And so this miss lowers the floor on this Texas defensive line. I think Dominic Williams just raised the floor, allows more depth. I don't think he's this A-plus player that people are making him out to be. I know you've fan bases across the country, and LSU, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas have kind of been making him out to be like the next Aaron Donald or something. Like if you read on Twitter, like, we got to get this guy, he's a big miss, da-da-da-da-da. And he's getting some of the reports. I'm glad Texas didn't get him if they weren't willing to shell out the number that I've been hearing. It's like $700,000 to $1 million a year for him. And I just don't see that. I just don't see $700,000 to $1 million for someone like that. I think he's a nice player, but I think we have like one or two guys, maybe even more, 3 guys on the roster that are just as good as he is. I don't think he's, like I said, an all-world type talent. He is a good player, and I do think he helps with depth. I think Texas probably would have ponied up if they didn't get Bill Norton. Bill Norton, I think, is not as good as Dominic Williams, but I don't think he's like Dominic Williams is an A player and Bill Norton's a C player. I think it's a B+ to a B- type move there. So I just don't understand why Texas fans are getting all angry about it. Another thing you got to realize, how this plays in the locker room. If he's like the third guy on the team, like when the season starts at Texas, and the first and second guy are like, hey, we're making this much and he's making like more than us, that can cause all types of dynamics in the locker room. So I'm personally fine with missing out. Does it hurt? Of course it does. I'm not going to sit here and say it wouldn't have helped our defensive line room, because it definitely would have. But is it end all be all? No. I think the one that hit, and I'm going to keep saying this, that hurts us the most, was missing Jamari Caldwell. I think that one hurt way more than this when he went to Oregon. So is it a miss? Yeah. Will we get to see him late in October? Yeah. Hopefully we get to beat the crap out of him up front with our offensive line, but we'll see what happens.
Guess how many tackles for loss Aaron Donald had as a senior at Pitt?
Tackles for loss. Okay. How many? He played 12 games, I'm guessing. So let's say 13 and a half, 14.
29.
Holy crap.
29 tackles for loss. He had 66 in his career, 29 his final season with 11 sacks. He had 2 11-sack seasons. Yeah, he's obviously, to even bring that guy up, he's one of the greatest players in the history of the NFL. What I think the dynamic is here, Matthew, is number one, the transfer portal gets a lot of attention. We're starving for news. We're starving for excitement. Fans are looking for the next, piece to the puzzle that could get them over the top. Dom Williams is a really good player. Absolutely, he's a really good player. But I think way too much is made out of not just him, all sorts of players, guys that are, backups to backups that are getting 10 and 12 tackles a year are being blown out of proportion because people just want news. I guarantee that even for very ardent college football fans, there were players taken in last week's NFL draft who are really good players, but because they signed somewhere, never moved, never transferred, and filled a position that generally doesn't have stats that you see on a regular basis, you didn't even know who they were. and they were really good players, and they got drafted in the first 3 or 4 rounds of the NFL draft. So don't make something out of somebody like Dominic Williams to be something that he's not.
Yeah, and it was just one of those things. They showed some of the clips when he was at LSU, and he's getting like bottle service at like this club, and I'm like, this guy's a good player and all, but he is not this guy. Like, I'm not giving this guy bottle service at a club down Baton Rouge, but they really needed him. If you look at their depth chart, they do not have any defensive tackle. So I understood their situation. And I guess there are reports of he was making like calls last minute, like, if you want me, bump up your offer. And to me, that's another thing too. If that's the number one goal for somebody, I don't want them on this team. Period. I don't. I saw how that worked down in College Station, where that was the number one goal of 90% of the guys on that team is let's get as much money as possible. And you saw how that turned out. And I love how Steve Sarkisian goes about this as the first thing we talk about is work in football. That will be the last thing we talk about as NIL. If you're bought into Texas, if Texas is your top 3 and you really want to come here, but you're a few dollars off, fine, we can talk that. But if all you want is money, we're good. And I think that's what it comes down to. And I think that's the right way to approach it.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's the approach of most of the best teams in the nation, that they know who they are. They know that they're going to get premium talent, and they want a certain mindset. And there's nothing wrong with having a business mindset and understanding, okay, the further you get along in this process, the more you become a businessman and you are working toward an NFL career. But if you're going to make a decision based on $50,000 or $100,000 a year, when you can look out for your future much better by aligning yourself with a school and a brand and a coaching staff and a team that's going to make you so much better than that, and maybe buy you 3 or 4 rounds in an NFL draft, or maybe even just guarantee that you get drafted instead of being an undrafted free agent and all of that. If you can't see that, then you're probably not necessarily looking at the big picture.
No, like if you're looking at a program and they offer you $1 million, but the one that's better developing offers you 500,000, if that's the difference between 2 or 3 rounds, you'll make up that money when you get drafted. So to me, I'm looking at development and stuff like that. And I think Texas, under Steve Sarkisian, look at the last 2 drafts. I think we're in the top 5 in drafted players. So that has to be a thing now. There's really no negative angle to recruit Texas. I think we give fair NIL deals. We're starting to recruit even higher than we have been. And we develop. So I mean, I wish them the best. I'm never going to wish any harm to a kid or anything like that. But Oklahoma really hasn't done much under Brent Venables. He hasn't really produced that much NFL talent. They've struggled mightily defensively, even though that's inside the ball. So time will tell. We'll see if he made the right decision.
Leonard Taylor is a case in point. So Leonard Taylor was a 5-star that went to Miami, played 3 years. He was not a bust. He showed flashes. He had his particular games. He didn't turn out to be an all ACC type of player, but he was in that discussion as like a 3rd team honorable mention kind of player, because he definitely did show flashes, but didn't stay for the entire time, didn't get developed to the degree that he should have. I'm not going to speak to his effort or his investment in it, but a 5-star who actually was on the field playing and showed in spurts that he could be the fulfillment of a 5-star and an NFL player, did not get drafted. Now, if he shows up somewhere else, maybe he gets drafted.
Yeah, and that's a big money. Like if he goes somewhere, let's say he's a 3rd-round pick, you're losing out on, from undrafted 3rd-round pick, you're losing out over a 4-year deal, $10 million probably. So, I mean, that's a lot of money. And that's what the thing, NIL is cool and all, but you're never going to make that type of money unless you're a quarterback maybe and you're like Caleb Williams type level. But you got to look at development, in my opinion. That's got to be number one.
We will take your Texas questions here at the Voice of College Football. We sit down for about 60 minutes with Matthew each and every Monday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central. So make it here and make it a point to get to the Texas channel. Don't know how many people are watching on the Texas channel right now. We got about 40 people watching total. So we will drop the link to the Texas channel because you got Matthew dropping content, Sonny Burma dropping content. Then, of course, our weekly show right here. And I know, Matthew, you and Sonny got together here in the last few days on a few topics.
Yeah, we talked NFL draft and stuff of that nature, just talking about the development that Texas has went through, where 2 years ago, this program had 0 guys drafted in the NFL, and then they go to 11. And if Michigan didn't add on a couple guys in the first or in the 7th round, then Texas has the most players drafted in the draft, which is just crazy to think about in 2 years. And I think we're headed on the right path under this staff, Mark. It's going to be fun times. Hopefully we not bounce back, but continues the success that we had last year.
Speaking of the NFL draft, who do you think got drafted that Texas will miss the most? And how are they filling in? Who's the next guy in line?
So that is an easy question for me. That is Byron Murphy. I think Byron Murphy is a guy that's going to dominate at the NFL level. I think he's going to be I'm not going to say Aaron Donald. I'm going to be done saying that. I think he's the closest I've seen to Aaron Donald, but Aaron Donald's a freak. I'll say Chris Jones, like that type of guy. That's the type of guy he can be in the NFL. I really believe that. And we're going to miss that, especially it doesn't help too that he lose Devondre Sweat the same season. So someone's going to have to step up. And the guy I'm going to continue to go back to is Alfred Collins. We really haven't had anybody that has jumped out to me recruiting wise, but that guy's been on campus. This will be his 5th year. And Chris Ash, who was when he was here under Tom Herman, said this. He didn't hesitate when he said it. Someone asked him how talented or who's the most talented guy? Who do they remind you of? He said Alfred Collins, and he said he reminds me of the Bosa brothers and Chase Young. That's how talented they said this guy was. You've seen flashes, and I think if he played to his absolute peak potential, he could be just as good as Byron Murphy. The problem is Byron Murphy brought that energy 99% of the time, brought those great plays 90% of the time. Alfred Collins, it's a coin flip. You see the intensity, you see the energy level come once in a while. Paxton, that's a great call too. I think the edges of this defense are going to be the strength with Barron Sorrell, Ethan Burke, Trey Moore, Colin Simmons. That's a really good foursome that can rotate. And I think you're going to have really good production from there. I think the interior is going to be okay this year. It's not going to be like it was last year. I'd be shocked if it is. Then we're talking national championship instead of winning the getting to the college football playoff. You're talking about winning the whole thing if you get that type of production again from the interior, because I expect the edges to be great this year for Texas.
So, folks, this is the week that we're unveiling our all-time program rankings at the Voice of College Football. We've released our first video. It is the Pac-12. Why are we doing the Pac-12? The Pac-12 doesn't exist, Mark. Why are you doing the Pac-12? Well, it's a good way to put a seal on the all-time history of the Pac-12. But we will also take those programs, of course, and put in their new conferences and rank them as well. So this is not a spit at the wall, what you will find in a lot of other locations, just, okay, well, it's got to be USC's got to be number one and on down the line. And then, of course, when we get to the end, when we do all the conferences, we'll put it all together. And again, we are not spitballing this. We are looking at all-time winning percentage, all-time bowl wins, major bowl wins. We are looking at conference championships. We are even going beyond that because conference championships is not a fair comparison within conferences. You've got Michigan State joining the Big Ten in 1953 when half the conference was there 50 years earlier. You've got the ACC starting in 1953. Florida State joined 1992. So we are doing a conference championship percentage as well as conference championships. We're national championships, NFL draft selections, first round selections. We're doing Heisman Trophy winners. We're doing every major position award all through every position. We are doing records during the college football playoff era during the 21st century since 1970. In addition to all time, we're doing AP poll points. We're also looking at how many times those schools finished ranked, top 10 and top 5, all of that. So we're not just spitballing this. This is pretty in-depth. Would I love to go even deeper, like go into strength of schedule and everything? Yes, but my database is only so extensive. So we've released the Pac-12. It's out there. It's on the main channel. Check it out. So, is there anything else that you would like to see in an all-time rankings?
All-time rankings. So you said players drafted awards. Man, let's see.
I forgot All-Americans.
Okay,
All
All-Americans.
Americans. I put that
Did you
in.
say, I don't know if this is that big of a deal, but Heisman winners?
Heisman winners. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think you've hit everything there.
We tried. We tried. And again, would I love to put a strength of schedule, but that's crazy to try to
Yeah.
figure that out. Unless there's a database out there. And if there is, folks, you find it for me. We would love to include a strength of schedule. All right. The defense for Texas was largely looked at as being the stopping point in a national championship run. In specific, the secondary. There is much analysis of what that has looked like during the BCS era and the college football playoff era. Probably one of the worst defenses that I can think of that won a national championship was Auburn in 2010. We also had the LSU defense, which was not stellar in 2019. Your thoughts about Texas's defensive performance and how good it could be this year?
Yeah, so everyone's saying the defense will be the problem, the defense will be the problem, and I agree with that to an extent. And I was just curious of like how teams ranked pass defense wise, rush defense wise, per run, and also total and per pass and total. So I looked back at the college football playoff and the last 10 winners, and basically, and I was going to include third down percentage defense in this, but what I realized when I started to dig into third down percentage, it's very random and it's basically not repeatable. For example, 2021 Georgia, which you could argue during the college football playoff era was the best defense, they were 43rd in the country on third down percentage, which isn't great. So I was kind of shocked by that. I was like, okay, maybe it doesn't matter. But overall, when you look through pass defense, run defense, there's a couple outliers, but they're all about the same. So the lowest per pass defense ever in the college football playoff era is tied for 2018 Clemson, and this one's kind of surprising too, 2022 Georgia. They're both 25th. That's the worst you get. It's the 21st pass defense per pass attempt in
per
the country.
pass attempt. So that's not total defense pass.
No.
Okay.
No.
Good.
Total defense though is, you hit the nail on the head with this one, Mark. Kind of it's second. LSU is 222.7 yards allowed during their national championship run with Joe Burrow. This one did surprise me. 20, Bama's the worst. The year afterwards with Mac Jones, 239.02 yards allowed per game, but they were elite rush defense. One of the best was 78.9 yards allowed per game that season. So you have to be good somewhere. Like when I broke these down per run and per pass attempt, you had to be in the top 13. That was the average. The average was 13th best for both of them. It was 12.7 and 13.2 per pass. So you have to be a top 13 team there. Overall, total-wise, you had to be top 8 rush defense, a top 8 rush defense, and a top 20 pass defense. So the pass defense, I think you can be worse on, which makes sense. I think it's easier to pass as it is to run in modern day football with the talent you have, the rules, and all of that thing, sort of thing. So Texas, if you take, I just looked back at their last 2 years because I think it's unfair to judge Steve Sarkisian on his first year, especially defensive wise. Surprisingly, 2 years ago, pass defense, they gave up 6.3 yards per pass attempt and 242.7 yards per game. The average for the pass defense, when I looked it up for the 10 national championship winners, was 196.7 yards allowed overall. So Texas is allowing about 43 yards more. And then per play wise, it's 6.04. So about 2/10 more overall than Texas was giving up 2 years ago. The average just between the 2 years, because Texas was way worse last year than they were 2 years ago on pass defense. They allowed 7.08 yards per pass attempt, is 6.69. So Texas is going to have to get half a yard per pass better over their average over the last 2 years, in my opinion, to compete for to have a real chance to win a national championship. Run defense, actually, we're right there. 104.05 yards per game. 102.54 is the average. We're right there. If the run defense stays the same over the last 2 years, we can win a national championship. The pass defense is what is holding us back. We just have to be a little bit better. Half a yard per attempt. If we get to that, I think with this offense, we can win a national championship.
So a few thoughts from me here, Matthew, and I've looked at this kind of stuff pretty extensively through the years doing various projects. One would be, we all have to understand that the schedules for those teams that win national championships, you have to understand that they're tacking on 3 games at the end of the season against 3 of the best teams in the country. So that even makes it more impressive what they're able to do statistically. Take 2021 Georgia, they're playing Alabama, Michigan, and Alabama again, the final 3 games of the season, and trying to uphold both offensive and defensive numbers that are among the best in the nation. So that's a difficult task. So that even accentuates how good these statistics are because they're tacking on extra games against the best teams in the country. The other thing is, I'd be curious about the pass efficiency defense, because what I've noticed, and again, I don't have it stored, but just again, empirical evidence based on a bunch of projects, is that the passer rating defensively has been extraordinary for most of these teams. The like touchdown to pick ratio is always really good. Let's see, Michigan last year, what are we looking at? Last year, they were 3rd in the country in passer rating against. They gave up 8 touchdown passes and 18 picks. Let's see, it would be Georgia the year before in 2022. Their passer rating against, they were down at 15, but again, they only gave up 15 touchdown passes and 12 picks, and they faced Bryce Young twice. I think that's a pretty telling statistic down through the years, the passer rating. Look at Georgia in 2021, 10 touchdowns, 16 picks, had the number 2 passer rating in the country. And obviously Cincinnati had those 2 corners, and they finished number 1 that year.
Yeah, I mean, there's only really 2 outliers on this list, Mark, that skew the numbers, and it's 20 Bama and 19 LSU. So I've said, I don't know, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, I mentioned for the first time, I think Texas's path to a national championship this year is that formula. I don't think they're going to be elite on the back end. I think their edges are going to be decent enough to get to the quarterback and help out the back end this year. But I think Quinn Ewers is going to have to be a Mac Jones, going to have to be a Quinn, or going to have to be a Joe Burrow, because that's the type of team we have. We have the talent. Honestly, I think 20 Bama is the closest thing that I can think of, because you have Steve Sarkisian running the offense. If I was Steve Sarkisian, I am handing that tape to Quinn Ewers and say, if you execute like this with the talent we have at running back, at line, our offensive line, and at wide receiver, we can do this. And I think we can match Alabama's type of defense. Like I said, run defensive-wise, they gave up 113.1 yards per game. They were 12th in the country per run. I think we can kind of be in that ballpark. And they gave up 239.02 yards per game, 6.64 yards per attempt, which was 20th in the country. I think we can be somewhere in there, and I think our offense can replicate that. I think that is the path to a national championship for Texas, and I think, honestly, that's going to be the only path unless the secondary just grows so much. I don't see us going from 7.808 yards per pass attempt to 6.04. I just don't see that happening. That's over a yard per attempt in 1 year with the same amount of talent. I think the safeties have definitely gotten more talented and better, but I don't know about the cornerbacks.
That Alabama team got torched twice. They played Ole Miss and gave up 48 points and a zillion yards, like 600 yards, tie game with about 5 minutes left in Oxford, and won 63-48. And then they got torched by Trask and that Kyle Pitts team in the SEC championship game, but won that game. They played well in the playoffs against Notre Dame and Ohio State. The LSU team in 2019, I got to say, when they really needed it against Clemson, that was a tight game, 28-25, late 3rd quarter, early 4th quarter. And they really played a great 4th quarter against Trevor Lawrence and pitched a shutout to close out that game. And at the Oklahoma game, all you had to do was watch the first 10 plays of the game and you knew who the superior team was. So giving up 28 points was like, it didn't matter. So I'm sure that was a ton of garbage yardage because they completely blew them out of the stadium. But they faced 2 of that year, of course, in a classic game, and played a just brutal schedule, Texas included, of course.
Yeah, and I think that's the way forward. You have to have all-time, basically, quarterback performances the whole year. I mean, Mac Jones came in, second in the Heisman that year behind his teammate who he was throwing to, and Devontae Smith, who had an insane year, probably one of the best years ever for a wide receiver. And then you had Joe Burrow have the best single season in the history of college football. So that's what I'm saying. Quinn Ewers is going to have to do something similar for Texas to win the national championship. I think they'll make the playoffs. I'd bet a lot of money that they would make the playoffs. I don't, but for them in the fan base, for whatever reason, national championship is the expectation. That isn't my expectation. I don't think we have the talent, like I said, on the back end. And I love Quinn Ewers, but I don't believe in him enough to say that he's going to duplicate a Mac Jones type season or a Joe Burrow type season. I think the ceiling for this team right now, as constructed and without seeing a game, to me is, again, what they did last year, a top 4 team. I think that's the ceiling. I think Oregon, with the additions they have made, I think they're the 3rd best team in college football. I think Ohio State and Georgia are kind of in a tier by themselves. I think the only thing holding Ohio State back right now is their quarterback. And I kind of want to see more from Carson Beck too, because in some big games last year, Carson Beck, in my opinion, did not live up to expectations. So can that be the difference? If Quinn Ewers takes that next step and is just better than every quarterback he faces, we've seen in the history of college football, 2005 national championship game, I think USC had more talent. Guess what? They didn't have Vince Young, and that's what it came down to. So Quinn Ewers, that's what's going to take, in my opinion, this year for Texas to win a national championship.
Good stuff here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. Yes, Sam Ehlinger, Joe Burrow, great game on the road for LSU, of course, to open things up. Like 45-38 comes to mind, something in that range. Yep. And great game there. Who knows what would have happened with Texas that season if they pulled that game out, and Tom Herman and so forth, because that team, was that the team that, would they go?
8-5, I think, or something like that.
5.
Yeah, I think
that's the team that beat Utah in the Alamo Bowl, I believe. That was the year after they won the Sugar Bowl. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. 2 things come to mind. Keontae Ingram dropping a wide open touchdown basically at the beginning of the game. That hurt really bad. And then the 3rd and 17 jump throw from Joe Burrow moving to his left. That's one of the best throws I've ever seen. Right on the money, and Just Jefferson takes it to the house.
Somebody had asked us in here to pick our playoff teams, which of course is not going to be official for me for a long, long time, but I'll play along. Do you have a pick, Matthew?
Well, it's hard now because of 12 teams. I'm trying to just think how, and also the format. I mean, right off the bat, I think I'll put it in categories. Shocked. I'd be absolutely shocked if these teams don't make it. I think Ohio State makes it. I think Georgia makes it. I think Oregon makes it. I think Texas makes it. After that, I think there's I kind of want to throw them in. I'm going to do it. I think Penn State's locked too. They win 10 games every year. I think they're making a 12-team playoff. I'd be shocked if they don't. Basically, if they just repeat it every year, what they've done the past 4 or 5 years, they're in the playoff. That's what it's going to take. Just repeat what you've done. Go 10-2. You'll be in the playoff. Michigan is on that outlier, or on that tier to me, like teetering to get into me for me in the Big Ten. I just don't know about the quarterback position. I think the defense is going to be very good, but you have to be at least average offensively, and I don't know if they're going to be that. Man, I'm trying to think other teams. SEC, I think Ole Miss is kind of in that same boat as Penn State, where I think they're going to win 10 games. I think they'll be in. Big 12. If someone can tell me right now who's going to win the Big 12, tell me, because I don't know who's going to win the Big 12. I think there's like 6 different teams that would not shock me if they won the Big 12. So the winner of that, I would if Jeff Fish didn't take the Washington job, I think Arizona, I'd put my money on Arizona. I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So I think it's either going to be Kansas State or Utah representing that conference. Let's see. And then it just, you have to have a group of 5 champion, don't you?
And you skipped the ACC, didn't you?
Yeah. I'll pick Clemson. I'll take Clemson in the ACC. I think Florida State takes a little bit of a step back, and I think Clemson is probably going to be a little bit better than they were last year. So I'll take them. Sleeper, dark horse, Virginia Tech. They have a lot coming back. We'll see what happens. I don't 100% believe in that though either. I don't even know who I would take in the group of 5. Like I don't know, because all the good group of 5 teams are in the Power 5 or Power 4 now. So I don't know out of there. To me, it's just too early to tell, but there's like 5 or 6 teams I'm pretty confident. The other 6, I have no idea.
Let's see if you named 11 teams. Ohio State, Penn State,
State,
Ole
Oregon.
Miss. Okay, or in the Big Ten,
Yeah.
Ohio State,
State,
Oregon,
Oregon,
Penn State for
State.
sure.
Yeah.
You're kind of on hold with Michigan. You've got
Yeah.
Clemson, you've got Ole Miss, you've got Georgia,
Texas.
Texas, a Big 12 champion.
Yeah.
That's 8.
Yeah. I have no clue who the other 4 are going to be. I mean, I'd be guessing at this point. If I had to guess, Missouri from the SEC, I think they're going to have another good season, but I mean, I'm not confident in that.
Okay, if we're going to go outside of the 8 or 9 that we just mentioned, that seem to be the general consensus, and I think Utah's not a clear-cut favorite in the Big 12, but I think they're the best team in the Big 12. But I wouldn't be surprised Kansas State in particular. Oklahoma State, of course, has quarterback, running back.
Honestly, a dark horse in the Big 12. I was big on them last year. If Jalen, but you see that I can't promise this. I said last year if Jalen Daniels is healthy, they'll win and they'll be in the Big 12 championship game. I think if he's healthy, they would have been in the Big 12 championship game. And I'll say it this year: if he's healthy, I think they'll win the Big 12. But he's never healthy. But that would be a dark horse to look out for in the Big 12.
Okay, my dark horses are going to be. I like your Virginia Tech pick. They have a high level of production coming back. Tennessee's a dark horse for me. Yeah. USC is a dark horse for me. And I guess you could say all sorts of teams in the Big 12. I never put anything past Chris Kleiman. I think they're a buttoned up unit and they'll compete. I don't know if Penn State's, they're really not a dark horse. So those are my dark horses. I'll say Tennessee, USC, and Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I could see Tennessee. It's going to be interesting. It's going to come down to Nico for them. If Nico is the guy who came in and played pretty well, in my opinion, for his first start ever versus a good Iowa defense in the bowl game, I think they can make the college football playoff. Notre Dame too. Why Notre Dame will make it? I don't know why I didn't mention them.
Yes, I'm on the Notre Dame bandwagon as well.
Okay. So basically, I think there's 8 or 9 teams that are pretty likely, and I think there's like 3 spots open.
We have a good list of dark horses in the chat, which very well lines up with my plus or minus 3 theory. So we've got Sandra with a West Virginia selection. We've got, we didn't even mention Alabama. How in the world could that happen? Rutgers.
Rutgers.
Playoffs.
Man, what is the money? The money on that to make a college football playoff's got to be insane.
Nick, they've got to win 10 games.
Yeah.
They've got to win 10 games. Rutgers. Okay. Syracuse. Yes. That's a bit of a stretch as well, but I like it. And of course, Ole Miss has killed the portal. And yes, Utah looks solid.
That's the thing, though, too. Like, you're going to have to win the Big 12 because I don't think the Big 12 is getting 2 teams in the college football playoff. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah. On one hand, I think there's so many spots there that you would think all the major conferences would get 2 teams, but just look at last year as an example. Oklahoma State's not getting into the playoff at 9-4 after getting drubbed by 4 touchdowns in the Big 12 championship game. So, yeah, it might be a rough go for Big 12 runner-up because this league's just going to cannibalize itself.
Yeah, unless we're just completely wrong about the cannibalization and they both enter with 1 loss and then it's a close game. I think that's the only path to where you get both in. But if it's like it was last year minus Texas, I mean, it's not happening. Like you said, Oklahoma State was never good. I don't even think they would have they might have gotten in a 16-team playoff, but that's like they're right on the edge for that, in my opinion, since you went, like you said, 9-4 and got blown out in your conference championship game.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Comments and questions, we will take them. Matthew, was there anything else that you wanted to hit on tonight?
Not really. It's kind of a dead period for Texas football right now. You know, you had the last couple days, or what was it, last week, where you could enter the portal. No one really entered the portal from Texas ever since Terrence Brooks, which he hasn't even picked a school yet, but he has been reached out to by quite a bit. So that's going to be interesting to see where he goes. But Not right now. No, it's pretty quiet. And I think that's a good thing. You know, for a while we were in the recruiting battles and losing recruits and also losing guys off the roster. So now it's just time to just get this team better, get them ready to go for the season opener.
Again, folks, if you want a deep dive on all-time program rankings, and I understand my introductory video is not going to get a whole lot of people excited because it's about the Pac-12 and the Pac-12 is defunct, but I thought, hey, this is apropos to put a bow on the final rendition of the Pac-12. All the numbers are sealed. That's what it's going to be for all of history in the Pac-12, and you can guess who is by far and away. I don't think there's a category in which this particular program does not lead the Pac-12, every category, except for like record the last 10 years, but all the all-time categories. And it's a very interesting dynamic of Utah, Oregon, and Washington almost have identical records in the last 10 years.
That's pretty interesting.
And USC and Oregon's records are almost identical. Their winning percentages are identical since the year 2000.
Well, when you're done with conferences, will you rank them just overall?
Put them all together. Yes,
okay.
We'll put it all together. So what we're going to do, we're going to do every conference. I'm also going to do a live stream so you guys can call and fill up the chat with all sorts of questions and comments and everything I did wrong. And and we try to put it into context as well. I don't know anybody out there that is looking at conference championships by a percentage basis. So keep that in mind, that's about as fair as you can slice it. The other dynamic that's impossible to fight through is basically Utah was a group of 5 team before 2011. And there are tons of examples, Louisville, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So they all entered big time college football at different times. So Utah's records are a little elevated against weaker competition. And you can't necessarily validate those conference championships in the WAC. And so it's impossible to have a perfect system, but we do the best we can.
I have a feeling I know the top 2 in the Big 12. I think it's going to be, unfortunately, Oklahoma 1 and Texas 2, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, there's a pretty significant win percentage difference off the top of my head. And really everything, Oklahoma's got a pretty decent lead. Now, I don't know if there was a difference in when they joined the conference.
I don't know that either. I don't think so. If there was, it wasn't like a big gap. It was a couple years.
All right. Very good. Well, we do appreciate you being here, folks, at the Voice of College Football. And Matthew and I get together every Monday, 7 Eastern, 6 Central. So make it a point. Bring your friends in here. 1 or 2 or 50. We will take as many as we can get. We would love to build up the Texas channel and this Texas show in particular. So we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Our next stop is in 2 hours on the USC channel. Speaking of which, USC and our Trojan Conquest live show with Matt and with Tim. And that is tonight at 10 Eastern, 7 on the West Coast. And we will see you then. Matthew, thanks for making it happen.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark.